When watching All Quiet on the Western Front, the film just doesn't ease you into the concept of war. It puts you directly in the middle of it. Puts you right in the middle of the battlefield, stripping away all the glory and all the romanticized visions of what war really is, and showing that it's nothing but brutal, senseless violence and murder. Nothing more, nothing less. So, on that depressing note, my name is Dylan Serene, and this is my film vlog review of All Quiet on the Western Front, a 2022 Netflix film. In this video, I'm going to break down the cinematography, camera techniques, acting performances, sound design, and how that all comes together to present a psychologically hellish, devastating war that was World War I. Most importantly, I'm going to go over the themes of the film, and that includes innocence lost, the evolution of machinery and technology, the juxtaposition of bureaucracy with the fighting that was happening simultaneously, and the cycle of violence that drives all the themes and the entirety of the film. So to give a little bit of historical context, All Quiet on the Western Front actually started as a 1929 novel written by Erich Remarque. Now, Erich was a World War I veteran for the German army, and so this novel was written with actual experience. There was actually two film renditions, one in 1930 and as well as a 1979 television version. Obviously a little bit less violence in both of those. Hurry up! The 2022 film that I'm reviewing was directed by Edward Berger, and he's an Austrian-Hungarian director. And for comparison, he also directed movies such as Conclave. Berger's vision for the film was to be as realistic as possible, to give almost a documentary-style feel to the film. And I think this quote for Berger perfectly encapsulates why he made this film. War films like this matter because they refuse to let us sanitize or romanticize history. Instead, they confront us with the consequences of nationalism, violence, and political ambition. Now, some of the most striking aspects of the film itself have to be the visuals and cinematography.
Kaffee und ein Gläschen Wein und ein Gläschen Wein. Mädchen, ich liebe dich, aber
The film mostly relies on natural lighting, and this is pretty evident from the very beginning of the movie. The natural lighting highlights a lot of the realistic nature of the film and shows a lot of the grittiness as well as the horrifying aspects of war within the film. And a big part of this of these realistic aspects is the color palette that is used for the entirety of the film. You see a lot of grays, blacks, whites, browns, a lot of very bleak colors, and this is kind of meant to be comparative to the dark, bleak, senseless reality that is war. And while these bleak colors are about 90 to 95% of the entire film, I think it's also important to point out that in the beginning, when the main cast of characters, the German boys who are excited and signing up for the German army to fight in World War I, that is the only time in the film where you see bright, sunny colors. And I think this is kind of meant to be a motif of how, without them knowing what is happening or going to happen to them in the war, everything is bright and sunny. And then as soon as they get into war and see the horrors of what they have to face, everything becomes bleak. And then the rest of the film is bleak.
Es ist wie ein Schachspiel. Es geht niemals um den Einzelnen, sondern immer nur um das Gesamte. Sie werden sich als würdige Träger dieser Uniform erweisen und die gegnerische Front in Flandern durchbrechen. Und dann werden Sie in ein paar Wochen schon nun endlich auf Paris marschieren. Ja! Unsere Zukunft, die Zukunft Deutschlands, liegt in den Händen seiner größten Generation. Meine Freunde, das sind Sie! Darum auf in den Kampf! Für Kaiser, Gott und Vaterland!
Now, these bleak colors are also paired with close-up camera work. These close-up camera scenes are a good majority of the movie. About 90% of the film is filmed with close-up scenes. And I think this is meant to show the emotions, or lack thereof, of the soldiers in the war, to show the devastating mental effects that the war has had on these individuals. And I think it's meant to give the film more of that documentary, realistic feel that it has. It also works brilliantly with showing the close-up of the weapons, the violence, the gore, which sounds a little bit morbid, but I personally feel like with a war film of this caliber, you almost kind of have to show that violence and that bloodiness to really get the message of what is really happening, the true horrors of war. Even something as small as showing dirt on glasses just shows every little bit of discomfort that these soldiers are going through. And I think that also goes into the level of detail that has been portrayed in the film. And I think, honestly, a perfect example of the color palette and the camera angles and cinematography coming together perfectly actually is in the very first scene of the movie, which we'll show right here. Now, I personally think the beginning scene might be the most powerful scene in the entirety of the film, mostly due to the fact that the main theme of the entire film as a whole is the juxtaposition of nature uncaring, just nature being itself, with, you can see with the fox in the den with her pups, and the juxtaposition of the war that's happening right next to nature, just humans slaughtering each other. And then you have an indifferent nature, and then you just have the dualistic nature of that. It really is no shock or surprise at all that the film won a nomination for Best Achievement in Cinematography. So following that, I think an almost equally as important aspect to the cinematography is the sound design and score. And kind of going back to what I was saying a few seconds ago, it's almost the same concept as nature, versus industry, especially with the sound, because the majority is a bunch of natural sounds like birds, wind, trees swaying, even wind chimes blowing in the wind in the French countryside, versus the machinery of war, gunfire, tanks, flamethrowers, even physical violence with soldiers fighting, getting stabbed, and this all kind of comes together cohesively to show the entire aspect of what makes a war. And even more powerfully, representation of this is the soundtrack, which was composed by Volkner Bertelmann, and this is such an incredibly iconic soundtrack because this sound right here, you might have heard that on a famous TikTok sound, some memes. It's kind of become very, very culturally relevant and even part of certain jokes on TikTok and Instagram. But even with the sound in a joking manner, it shows the cultural relevance and how far this soundtrack has made it into the public sphere. That three-note industrial motif is, in my opinion, not only terrifying, but it kind of represents like the very harsh, sudden, dramatic nature of the war, and it easily gets stuck in your head, which is kind of shows why it became such a powerful song and meme. And obviously, this film would be nothing without the set of actors that it has. The lead role, however, for obvious reasons, is the most important, and that is the main protagonist, or not even protagonist, but the main character in the film, Paul Baumer, who is played by Felix Kammerer. I probably butchered that pronunciation, but his acting particularly shines in his vulnerability for the character. Paul's transformation from a caring, sensitive, idealistic teenager in the very beginning with the whole world ahead of him to just absolutely, I guess you could say, corrupted, physically shaken, PTSD, just completely all hope lost, is one of the most depressing transformations you're probably going to see in any film. I think one of the more successful acting ventures of this film is the ability for all the actors to just do that lifeless stare that you get when somebody goes through something incredibly traumatic, and it's almost like a void is in their eyes, and this just comes through perfectly in the film, and it just, again, just compacts that super depressing aspect that war can bring about somebody. All the supporting actors too do an incredible job of building on those aspects of friendship, fear, and disillusionment. So one of the main central themes of the film is loss of innocence, and this was kind of explained earlier, how Paul, in the beginning, innocent, full of life, by the end of the film, absolutely destroyed inside and out as a person. He's just literally a shell of who he used to be. And I think this character motif can honestly be applied to any person that is any soldier in any war film. It doesn't stay in World War I. It can be applied to any war, from the Vietnam War, Revolutionary, the Korean War, any of them. It just perfectly encapsulates that sadness that comes about from war. Next, the theme of bureaucracy versus the actual reality of war. I think one of the most important aspects of the film is it does a really, really good job of showing, the rich politicians, generals, all on their cushy trains, all on their cushy lifestyles, dictating what's happening in the war, while these young soldiers, like played by Paul, are actually out there losing their lives and committing atrocities for these people who may or may not have any idea what kind of violence is actually transpiring.
In der Hoffnung, dass Sie unsere Anwesenheit zum Anlass nehmen, alle Feindseligkeiten auszusetzen. Im Namen der Menschlichkeit bitte ich Sie für die Dauer der Verhandlungen einer sofortigen Waffenruhe zuzustimmen.
And I think overall the most important theme of the film is the cycle of violence. So this is perfectly encapsulated in the very, very beginning of the film. You actually see a young man who is going into battle. This is not Paul. This is a separate character in the very beginning, who is just in war, in a battle, and then it just you see him go into the front lines, and then it kind of cuts off, and then it starts with the story of Paul. When Paul gets his military uniform, he says, "Hey, look, this is a mistake. There's somebody else's name on this uniform." They just rip it off, say, "Oh, that's a mistake. Don't worry about it." But then you look carefully, and you see that name was actually the original soldier who was at the very beginning of the film. Now, this kind of shows how there's just a cycle of violence. The clothes got recycled, and as well as the young men in battle dying. And again, this also goes to the bureaucracy, with just these old men dictating this war, not really caring about these young men that are just dying, and getting replaced with other sets of young men. And yeah, it's very, very depressing, but I think it's a very, very important lesson and aspect of the film. So, my personal feelings about the film, it is personally one of my top 3 favorite films. I am actually a student of history. I'm a history major, planning to be a museum curator in the future. That is my passion, my dream. And I think films like All Quiet on the Western Front are incredibly important, not only as a historical lesson, but to show, to share the message of human suffering, something that is ever present, no matter what kind of technology is present. No matter what's happening in history or in the future, there will always be human violence and suffering. And the only thing that we can really do, especially as a historian, is study these events and make sure that these lessons that we have learned don't repeat for the future. And to be honest, I've probably seen this film a good 15-20 times since it was released in 2022, and I just always think about it. Especially from that beginning scene to the very end. I just never been able to stop thinking about it. So in conclusion, this is we've explored the history, the context of All Quiet on the Western Front, the cinematography, the sound design, the soundtrack, the acting, the camera angles, some of the more powerful scenes within the film, and the themes that make it, in my opinion, one of the most impactful war films ever created. Now, granted, there are other war films that are equally as powerful, and that I enjoy just as much, like Saving Private Ryan, 1917, We Were Soldiers. There's an entire list, and I think we can learn different aspects and different things from every single one of those films. But I think the combination of all the technical aspects I described earlier make All Quiet on the Western Front one of the most powerful examples I can think of. So thank you so much for watching, and if there's one thing I hope you can take away from this, it's inspiration, to watch the film, but not only watch it, but to take in the message and to apply the historical lessons, to modern day politics, as well as, when you interact with a soldier, and, just take in those historical lessons. So thank you for watching. Have a good one.